Welcome to the Living Ageless and Bold podcast. Each episode, I bring you amazing women who inspire, educate, and share their experiences and journeys along the way. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's relax and have some fun hearing what can be accomplished after 55. I'm your host, Christina Daves, and I'm so excited to bring you amazing women with real stories, sharing their experiences and just their journeys along the way. And today's guest is really, really special to me. She is my coach. She is a mentor, and she's also become a friend, and I've learned so much from her, and she certainly helped put this whole podcast together. So Barbara Barna Abel is a media coach. She's a talent development scout, per se. We'll talk about that. And she is the podcast host of her award-winning podcast, Camera Ready Abel. Welcome, Barbara.
Oh, Christina, thank you so much for having me, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations on living your truth and sharing it and creating this amazing platform that is both a pleasure and welcome, needed, impactful. I'm really happy for you.
And thank you. And this was a lot of work to get to this point and where we are. And but there's so much I want to talk about with you. Because what you do now, because I want to talk about now and then I want to go backwards in time. But right now, I mean, you work with CEOs doing media coaching, and you work with college students being able to speak on camera. And let's talk about why it's so important now more than ever that we're all good on camera.
Well, it's really important now. Communication has always been important. And now more than ever, if the pandemic taught us anything, is that we're always communicating through a lens. We have been for a really long time, but we didn't realize it. So even in business in the past, if you were, had satellite offices, you might always have been doing teleconferencing and all sorts of communicating through a lens, even, just doing, stuff on your social media. But, what we're doing right now, appearing on a podcast and Zoom interviews and remote work and all these things, it's not going away. So at the end of the day, it's all communication, but I happen to specialize in the area where we learn how to communicate through a lens, because it's also really intimidating to people. And for a million reasons, which, by the way, I had to work through my own issues too. So I'm like, like the hair club for men, I'm a member as well. But the point is, it's like, it's a tool like anything else. So once you get comfortable with it and learn to work with it, it's just like, oh yeah, here we are.
Okay, so let's go back in time and let's talk about how you got comfortable with it. I had so much fun reading. We've known each other for a while now, but really reading about you and learning about you. So you graduate from college and you get what might be the coolest job ever. So let's talk about that.
I did. What was my cool job?
When you were the first intern for Virgin Records.
Oh my God, that was such a thrill.
I'm going way back. I'm going from the beginning.
Way back. That was such a thrill. And like so many things, it's not actually the internship I wanted. It's the internship I got. I didn't even know that existed as an option. I really wanted to work for this really famous DJ named John Peel for British radio. He's a legend in the John Peel sessions, et cetera, et cetera. And I went on a program, the Beaver College program. It's a college in Pennsylvania, but they introduced the notion of interning into the UK. So that was the only one. Like that was, if you want to have an internship, they were it. I was thrilled to get accepted. And so anyway, the internship director brings me into her office one day and says, I'm so sorry, we couldn't make that one happen for you because only British nationals can actually work there. And I was like, instead, I hope you're not too disappointed, but we got you a position at Virgin Records. I was just like, oh my God. And so it was transformative and really, really fun. The other thing you do have to understand too, that nobody knew what interning was. Like they had introduced this concept and it was only a few years old. One of my roommates, who to this day is one of my very best friends and a very important, successful music business attorney, she actually interned in Parliament, and she worked for an MP inside of the shadow government, and a young Tony Blair worked in his office. I mean, they got amazing placements for people. But I bring this up only because nobody knew what to do with me in a weird way. It's like people who worked at the record company could not understand how and why I would work for free. They'd be like, Barbara, you're being exploited. And then,
oh my God.
And then, Richard Branson would come in, and I worked in the office of Simon Draper, who I want to say was like a distant cousin of Richard's. But anyway, and I was famous for like how I just memorized how everybody took their tea. So my nickname was Double T With, because that's how Simon took his tea. And and like all that, the heads of labels would come. So it was a really, really exciting time. And it was when Culture Club was huge and Human League. And I was there for when
All My Music.
Oh, I mean, I'm such an 80s baby. And when Virgin celebrated their 10th anniversary, and just as a sidebar, I mean, I could talk about this forever because it's not about me, but it's such a great story just to understand Richard Branson's story and how he launched Virgin Records when he was in college. And his first iteration failed because he was sending records out and waiting to get payment back. And of course, nobody paid him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they get paid up front. And then...
and now look at him.
Yeah, and now look at him. And then what launched Virgin was they put out the soundtrack to The Exorcist.
Really?
Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. So I was there for that party. And also they handled the sales. The Virgin sales team was the sales team for Island Records. And so there was a huge celebration because that was U2, and U2's album Boy entered the charts at #1, which was a big freaking deal. So that was, anyway, so a lot of really, really, really fun memories of that. And
but it's so fun to see. And again, this is for women our age, over 55. Everything you're talking about is resonating with me. Culture Club, Human League. When was the last time you heard that?
Well,
so now,
I still listen to.
Well, that's why we have playlists. But then it gets better. So you go from there to MTV right at the beginning. So how does that happen? Was it because of your internship, a door was open, or you just kind of did what you did and got this position?
Thanks for asking, because there's just actually in between. So again, I just as I'm talking about this, I realized I keep showing up on 10th anniversaries. So I was there actually for the 10th anniversary of MTV because it launched in 1980. I mean, it launched way before I ever had access to it. We were 5 people with cable boxes. But so in the intervening years, I actually worked. I had another internship in the U.S. At A&M Records. And then I worked in music management, and then I got a job working in the music department of a talent agency. And all these things are important to the story because among the things I discovered, took me a long time to figure this out, is I didn't really belong in the music business or that part of the music business because, I had, my skills are more around like people skills and coaching. And I was a really, really big fan. And my natural skills had nothing to do with what you required in the music business, which is really about sales. You're either a performer, creator, attorneys, or you're the sales and marketing people. And that's not my skill set. And so now I can sit back because I'm in awe of, people who are really, really good at that. And so where I found all these things come together is when I landed MTV Networks. And it's through a very good friend, Jackie Sharp, that she brought me in for like a 2-week project, freelance. The 2 weeks lasted for 3 months, and then I stayed for 11 years. But because it was a combination of having the music business background and then also the talent background in terms of understanding talent contracts and understanding how the industry works, and just bringing those two things together, because that was a unique skill set. I suppose in some ways it maybe still is, because it's such a hyper niche.
Sure.
Nobody else knew that, and they were like, "You have this thing that we need, and we're growing."
Well, and you were basically at the cutting edge of reality TV, like
yes.
all we watch now, but the shows that you launched and the people that you worked with, which I want to get into because there's some of my old favorites. But how did that start? Did you kind of come up with this concept of, hey, let's take this guy out and see how much he can eat? Adam Richman on Man vs. Food. Like, how does that come about?
I wish I could take credit for that.
Yeah.
And, well, no, and I also appreciate you asking that, because that gets into a question about what it is to be a producer and a creator. And again, I'm a good dot connector, and one of my superpowers is seeing potential of people and being able to like go, wow, you'd be really good. But I have so much awe and respect for producers and some of the people I've worked with who are so massively creative in terms of coming up with these concepts and formats when I think of someone like Dave Knoll, who's massively successful on TV, who created Chopped. He was an intern, or I think he was a PA at VH1. That's how we first met. So, now I've watched him skyrocket into, $1 billion with the television. So I don't have that. Like, I don't sit there and, here's a really, really good example. And I thought it was so brilliant. And I'm definitely, dating this episode, but recently Duolingo and Peacock put out, a promo for April Fools of a fake reality show with Duolingo. And it was like a spoof on Love Island or, dating shows. Yeah. But in this one, the whole catch was that nobody spoke the same language. And that's the Duolingo component. And it's really funny. And it's really extremely well done. I never would have thought of that in a million years. Never.
It's actually a good idea.
No, it's so funny. And so then when I played it for people, shared it with people who are in the industry and all the casting directors, and we're like, that's brilliant. And nobody knew that was fake. Everybody else in the outside world was like, that's like the funniest stunt I've ever heard. And for us, they're like, what a good idea. I'm still convinced Peacock put it out there as some kind of proof of concept.
To see. Yeah.
People buy this because it was hilarious. But I just meant long-winded digression that I wish I could say I came up with ideas that were that creative. But it was there for the birth of our, what we now consider reality, because it really starts with a PBS show in the 70s, which I was too young to watch, with the Loud family. That was the first, follow doc series on PBS. They followed this family, the Louds, from Santa Barbara. And that was an amazing thing. And so, Boonam Muri, who created The Real World at MTV, I think, they picked up on that. But I was there, so that's the point. It's like I'm still friendly, with some of the, cast. And you think about, like, they were always just walking the halls. Like, that was all sort of like, brand new. But my thing was talent driven. So it's like I booked RuPaul on the very first VH1 Fashion Awards, and Ru was amazing. And so it was taking that Ru amazingness and saying, what can we do with Ru? And that led to the original RuPaul show on VH1. So that was really fun. So, and the same thing is when Candace Bushnell was first writing the Sex and the City column for The Observer. So that's an example, like that plays to my strengths. So that was like, and I met her manager and I loved the column. I was like, what can we do with this? Created a show with Candace.
Really?
So my skill was like the people driven, like, you're amazing. What can we do with you?
Funny story. I was in Miami for New Year's Eve 1,000 years ago, and RuPaul literally turned a corner, ran into me, and knocked me over. It's my RuPaul story.
Helped you up.
It was New Year's Eve. It was crazy in Miami.
That's really funny. And also, Ru's really tall.
Really tall, and wearing heels.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just a bad encounter, turning a corner.
I had a Ru memory this morning that's sort of funny, but actually relevant to anyone in business, and it's about specificity. So when we were doing, it must have been the pilot episode for the original RuPaul show, and it takes a while for Ru to transition into Ru, like to get the whole outfit going, to get tucked. And so I asked his managers, Randy and Fenton, when we could expect Ru on set, and they said Ru will be there in 7 minutes. I was like, this is so good. It taught me a lot about how to be that specific and also claim that from other people, because 5 minutes really means nothing. 5 minutes could be 5 minutes, but people say, I just need 5 minutes, and they really mean a half an hour. And I was like, so I do it all the time. It just disarms people. How long do you need? 8. We'll be there in 8 minutes.
That's fun. Because my family, I always say, just give me 2 minutes, 2 minutes. And I've overstretched my 2-minute boundary too many times that it's like, oh, sure, 2 minutes. That's just kind of my go-to. So I love that. Next time I'm going to say, I need 4 minutes. I need 7 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, okay. We're just like, whoa, Ruin 7.
Yeah. So then what? So you do RuPaul. It's amazing. How fun. You've worked on so many great shows. Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, fabulous. How does that come about? Again, you've got, who comes up with that? And then you're like, did they come up with a concept and then you find the talent for it, or you find a talent and bring them to them and say, let's build a show around this amazing person?
Well, sometimes that happens. But now, and it's interesting because so much has transitioned to, digital and other platforms. But back in the day, after when my kids were little and I transitioned out of VH1. I had been there for 11 years. And then I started my own business. And it was just like the perfect time for me because cable was booming. And what I did was suddenly in high demand. And I was the only person in New York doing what I did. And then I had two counterparts in LA. Like we were it. It was just a great time to, very rare thing to fall into. And there was a lot of transition in the business. So many people I worked with at VH1 had also transitioned out. So I call it the Great VH1 Diaspora. So all my colleagues landed other places, and a lot of them became my, early clients. And so my beloved boss, Bill Brand, went to college with David Collins, who created Queer Eye. And so when that was, a pilot idea, and again, it's an interesting idea and what they did at the time and how different it would be now. So, David and his partners had a company called Scout Productions, which is still the name of the company, but they literally were a scouting company based out of, the Northeast. So, and this was their first idea for a television show.
It was not bad for the first one.
It was basically David's own experience of going to visit a friend who was newly divorced and realizing, his wife had taken everything, not in a mean sense, but it was just like this guy with no clue was starting over. And David he's like, you need a gay man to help you, get your kitchen together and decorate your house. Oh, ding, 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 idea for a show. And then they did something that everybody does now, but nobody did then. They created a beautiful, with what we call desktop publishing then, a beautiful visual of a deck, but it was more like a book explaining what the show was with the befores and afters and creating a visual for what the Fab Five would look like, because they didn't exist yet. And you were just so drawn in and you understood what the show was from reading, from seeing, this book. So that's really how it started. So they came to me Bill Brand connected us. And then it was like, we have this idea. And it was so ahead of its time that it was really was one of the most joyful things I've ever worked on. But also just interesting and touching how far the culture's moved. And it's been 21 years since we cast the pilot. And how many people, not everybody was out. People might be out in New York, but they weren't out their hometown.
Right.
And the ways we sort of gingerly worked, I would send, by the way, we sent everything on a fax. Very few people have email yet. Fax, and it's like, hi. And I remember my opening gambit was, I don't know if this would be up your alley if you know anyone. Because you're presuming that somebody would be into it, but you're not quite want to say, I think this would be good. Sending faxes. Anyway, it was such a joy. It was incredible.
So back then, obviously now we have so much technology. You can just knock shows out. You can knock movies out. I was just listening to a podcast about, they basically filmed a feature film in 7 days and even came in short. But back then, how many shows could you do at one time?
Do you mean how many projects could I work on at one time?
Yeah. So you did did you do RuPaul, then you moved to the next one and the next one, or were you doing 10 shows at one time?
Oh, it depends. So when RuPaul at VH1, I was running the talent development department. So we had a huge slate. So I worked with the program development and I liaised with all these other departments. So at the same time we might be doing RuPaul, we're actually also working on award shows and working on promos and a whole pipeline of different stuff. So and had a staff and a team and a lot of people and intersecting with tons of departments. And then when I had my own business, you would, staff up, staff down. Sometimes they're, working multiple projects at once and by the way, learning from that. And, that was in terms of living, ageless and bold, the hard way. But I've had learning to say no, learning to understand what it meant to have a capacity, learning, who you really want to work with and feel great about working with. All those things you have to learn on your own that happen along the way of being your own.
That comes with age and wisdom, I think.
Yes.
Being able to say to people, I'm not going to work with you. I don't care what you're going to pay me. I'm not going to put myself in that position to feel that way or be put down. Or I've done that a couple times and people look at me like, fired that client? I'm like, oh, I fired that client.
Oh, wow. To get to fire clients. And also just even having the intuitive sense to be like, this doesn't feel good, or there are definitely red flags. So then and I just be like, you know what? I don't know that I'm the right person for you, but I can recommend XYZ.
Exactly.
I'm just unavailable right now, however you want to phrase it. And then so I'm just trying to be helpful. I suggest so-and-so. every now and again, very rarely having to say to someone like, I don't think this is castable.
Interesting.
That would happen too, because again, ideas on paper that look really great. And I had a number of those experiences, like learning the hard way where, you'd work on it for a while and having to go back and say, this is not castable. And sometimes it's like the market has spoken. Like you've gone out to people, it's like, nobody's interested in this. It's its own kind of proof of concept, which for anybody listening, and this is getting deep in the weeds, but to understand in what's called the unscripted, so what you refer to as reality, even though in the UK, it's like structured reality. Like there's a much more acknowledgement of the scripting process. It's considered unscripted versus scripted or legit. And so the casting process is the development process, where in, legit or scripted, when it's written, the development process is in the writing. And so by the time you're casting, you know what you're doing. But for us, it's like you test the concept through the casting process. And that's also really exciting because sometimes, like Man vs. Food is an example where they had a very strong idea and we spent a lot of time. At one point, I knew like every competitive eater in America. And it was like, this is what this show is about, which makes sense on paper. And then an agent said, Adam Richman's agent was like begging me. He's like, you have to see him. He's just like, he heard about this. And so it comes in and he was incredible.
He was so good. I watched that show for years. I love that show.
Too much. And it just, but it's like, that's where the development process, it's like takes the show, somebody can come in and does something with this idea, it takes it in a new direction. And suddenly, you're shifting, you're developing around that. You have something better than the idea you had on paper.
So what do you do now? Like I talk to so many friends. They're like, oh, I should be a reality show. We should be a reality show. And I know people who've gone out and people will charge them $10,000, $50,000 to like put together a deck and do it. Is there, somebody has an idea for an unscripted show. Is there a way to submit it to a network? Or you really have to go hire somebody, go through this process, see, get it on paper, write a script? I don't even know what the process would be.
I would get my camera and I'd start doing my show on TikTok or whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
That's how you start. And that how so many things start. That's podcasts get turned into TV shows. Because first of all, we have to see that you can do it and have fun. Also, then you have more ownership if you created this. But I also think it's like, is it cooking with Babs? I'm obsessed with this woman. This woman Babs. But she came out of nowhere during the pandemic, and I just saw her cookbook, in Barnes and Noble. So that's just an example of like Babs just started doing her awesome Babs thing on Instagram.
Right.
There you go.
And look at Justin Bieber. Just some kid who went on YouTube and started singing.
Well, that's the entire music business now. It's like, it all starts on TikTok. But so the same thing with this, it's like, if you got somebody thinks it would be a great reality show, you have to think about, it's like, why? And by the way, there's so much available, by the way, like, literally hit the Googles and do a little research, but it's understanding, it's like, is this sustainable? What's the story? What's happening? What are the, what's the drama? But also it's like problem solution. It's the same thing. When you talk about pitching any kind of story, it's like, what's happening in every little thing that you're working out, that we care about, that we're allowed in, and then start doing it. It's the same way, by the way, I highly recommend this, is if you are, because a lot of people want to do, be in the HGTV space, it's like chronicle everything you do in a good way, like when you're renovating.
And you've got to have some personality. There's got to be personality. If you're a little kooky, a little whatever, that's a good thing.
But if you're going to start flipping houses, chronicle it. But also, that's a great way to build your business anyway, because if you want people to come find the houses that you're flipping, I don't know any good realtor who's not creating tons of video at this point. That's a little sidebar. But video is so key. So when somebody says, I have a great idea, noodle with it, understand what the industry standards are, then go create some of it. But I would not go spend $50,000. I feel bad for anybody. That's a lot of money for.
There's a lot of bad people out there.
Yeah.
Doing stuff that, but we talked about this too, as this whole concept evolves. And I didn't just wake up and say, ooh, I'm going to do a podcast. We did a lot of soul searching and who is this for and what am I passionate about? And it really is this, next step. Because and even my friends who are like, they've worked the whole time, they're retiring out of corporate after 30 years, they're 51 or 52 years old. That's nothing. There's a whole nother career. So mastering skills, learning things, like video is so important, if you want to do that kind of stuff. And, one of the things that you really inspired in me is it's never too late.
Oh, never.
Never.
And by the way, I was thinking about this, before logging on today. Just to remind everyone, I'm such a card-carrying believer that it's never too late. And sitting only inches from me is this great book called Late Bloomers by Rich Karlgaard, who's, I think, the publisher of Forbes. Okay. Right? But my husband just sent me a link to an article with Barbara Corcoran from CNBC where she talked about every successful person she knows has imposter syndrome. And I'm only saying that to remind everyone because the voice is always going to pop out. Your gremlin's going to always say, who do you think you are? Because I went through the same thing launching my own podcast. And I had this distinct moment where I hear some random summer night and there were like young people home from college partying too loud, on a balcony near me in Brooklyn. I don't know why someone kept me up. So I started off being like annoyed with them. And the next thing I know, the voice in my head going, who the hell do you think you are to be trying to do this at your age? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I had to talk myself off my own ledge. But I meant, so for anybody listening, it's like, that is such a normal part of the process.
And I got the biggest boost of confidence today. We have best friends that we vacation with every year. And our friend's daughter is my daughter's best friend. And I posted something on Instagram today about coming soon, the podcast, because I'm pre-recording a lot of stuff. And Sarah texted me and she said, I don't care what the rules are. If this is for 55 and over, I'm listening to every episode. And I was like, this is a 23-year-old. I'm like, thank you. I need that.
Absolutely. And well, first of all, that's really sweet. And as she should. And two, it's like, I get that when, like my son listens driving to work and his friends will send me notes. Oh, that was so helpful for me before I went into my job interview or what have you. And it's really, really gratifying because then it's like, focus on value, connecting, the impact. And then going back to even to your launch and things we talked about, it's like, what's fun? What do you enjoy doing? What's sustainable? It's like, you're so great talking to people.
I love this.
We're supposed to be doing. And I had caught up with you. So it's like, yes, you can do this. I
can do this.
You don't need, 15 people and $50,000 from your podcast. And
I wanted to do the video piece of it. I love doing the video. So we compromise that this is audio and video. So people listening can watch and people watching can listen too. But I went through, and again, you really helped me with this. Again, just as you're thinking of second chapters, third chapters, we've even called it. We got on a call and I said, Barbara, I can't do this. I said, why wouldn't Reese Witherspoon do this? Or Jennifer Aniston? And what you said to me, which is 99% of the people listening to this, is we're average, normal people that people can relate to. That we had kids, we worked, we had kids. We had to get up at 3 a.m. and change diapers. We didn't have I heard on that one podcast, they called it a night nanny. What is a night nanny? How do you do that? How do I get one of those?
Oh, no, I'm a weekend nanny. I didn't have one of those either.
Yeah, wow.
And then got through the 3 a.m. diapers. You and I were doing the, getting up at 4 to go to hockey.
Yeah, right. We are fellow hockey moms. So exactly, we did it. We worked and raised kids. I know we've talked about this. I'm so proud of my kids. They're good humans. I know your kids are amazing with what they're doing in the world. And now we're having fun on this next chapter.
Absolutely.
And so what led you to this? When did you, and I did event planning for a long time. And I remember I think I was engaged and I said, I can't throw parties until 3 a.m. anymore and be married and have kids. Like that was my aha moment of what my shift had to be in my late 20s. So what was it that, obviously you're working VH1, MTV. How fun is that, at that age? But at some point you shifted to what you're doing now.
So a bunch of things were happening at once. One was, stepping into opportunity. Did I have the vocabulary? Did I understand what I was doing? No, but it was just instinctual. And part of that, as I'm saying, is I always knew I wanted to have a family. Like that was my number one priority. and I'm working in television, and you can see the same thing in news. This happens. I mean, this is a trope, this shows up in movies, but anyway, television production is not easy, and it's really hard work, and it's so fun. But my point is, and I was working in long form and documentary style television, so that's a lot of travel. And people go out on the road for a really long time, and I was like, that doesn't seem like that's going to work for me. Like that, again, didn't know quite how to say that, but I was like, I don't want to do something where I'm like gone for 3 months at a time. And but as a sidebar, I often say that to people who come to me like, I would love to host a travel show. I mean, who wouldn't? But my point is, are you in a position in your life where you can travel? Which seems like an obvious, but oh, right, yeah, okay. So there's that. And then, so stepped into that. And then to your point, it's like I came to that moment where it was getting hard. And I was really, really conflicted because of the amount of travel I was doing. And by then I had a baby and a toddler. And again, didn't have the vocabulary. And there was maybe one or two other moms at the company by then. This is a young company. I mean, right. I remember walking down the hall like pregnant and, people turning the other way, like freaking out, like pregnant lady. I just
got a baby in there.
Too real. This is weird. Oh my God. When I think about pumping, they're really funny stories about because we had glass offices and it was just like,
oh yeah.
Anyway, I digress. But the point is, it was just a little bit ahead of these conversations. Like 10 years later, this would have been very common. But then It was like there weren't really resources. I didn't know who to talk to. Life all worked out. But then what happened to me was to start, having my own business. And this as well as I do. It's like I didn't work fewer hours.
Oh no.
I worked way more hours, but they were my hours, and right. I got to choose. And so that just made the difference because then I went from I gave so many hours per day. So it's like. I'm there so many more hours per day with my kids because I was traveling to LA every 4 to 6 weeks. And I got to the place where it was so hard. And trust me, there's some, when you have little ones, there is something thrilling and like delicious about like room service and being like by yourself. And like, oh my God, I actually got like solid 9 hours of sleep. So no complaints there. Like I really like enjoyed that. There are times I can remember a few specific times watching the Academy Awards in a hotel and going, oh, this is. But on the other hand, it was hard. And I remember we were doing Rock and Roll Jeopardy. And I remember I would fly there, get on the first flight in the morning from New York to LA and take the last flight out to be able to be kids, right? So your dad had like a flight attendant. I was like, this is unsustainable. Did I have that language then? No. And now that I'm, this many years out, it's easier to talk about. But then I was, I was a little like shamed and I felt like I was not doing a good job. And I had this sense I was supposed to be able to do it all. And felt so much pressure about that and really internalized all of that. But I'm really, really glad about my choice because I knew that my kids were my priority and I had only one chance. Right. And so, so I couldn't be everywhere at once. And I felt now I'm like, I couldn't be everywhere at once. And I own that. But at the time I was, I didn't necessarily.
It wasn't acceptable to say that back then.
Wow.
I'm so happy. And you have a daughter too. My daughter's 23. It's different now. I mean, not everything has changed, but you can stand up for things. The Me Too movement changed a lot. And I think you can stand up for who you are and what you believe in to a boss or to say this is, and I'm trying to empower her a little bit because sometimes she's not sure of what she can say or should say, but I think it's a lot different than when we were younger trying to do it all. I remember telling my parents that I wasn't going to work. I was going to be an entrepreneur. And they were like, no, you're not. Go get a job. Yeah. No, like now that's cool and hip. But when I was in my 20s, not so much. That was a big problem. My cousin who went to law school, that was good. That was great. But, what are you doing? Now it's okay.
When we were graduating, there was still the belief that you might spend your entire career with one company. It was just earned a transition, right? I mean, I was at VH1 for 11 years. It's unthinkable now. But she pointed about like what it is to live ageless and bold. I was thinking about it's like for me, it was really learning to identify and let go of the shoulds. Because the shoulds are where you get stuck. It's like I should be this. I should be everywhere. I should be this. I should be this kind of,
I love that.
Working parent. I should be all these. I should be, richer and more successful. And then from the coaching element, really starting to understand too, it's like you can't affect change or achieve what you want when you're stuck in the shoulds. because the only way to achieve what you want is for your subconscious and your conscious to be in sync. And so you can't be in the I should do this. You have to be in the I want to do this.
And life is so much better when you're doing what you want to do. You have a word of the year in 2022, which I'm now carrying over to this year too. My word was joy, joyful. I'm not doing anything that doesn't bring me joy. I mean, sometimes you're going to run into things, right, that make me happy. I want to do things with my kids that make me happy. I want to be with my friends who I have fun with. I want to laugh and just have joy in my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Barbara, what is your greatest accomplishment since you've turned 50?
I just turned 50 so long ago, I cannot
No.
You know what? Okay. So I'm going to think about this. So on a business level, I would say on a professional level was, successfully pivoting my business, like learning to adapt. So I take that as I really take that to heart, because that is, and I think thematically with what you're accomplishing here with the podcast was not quit it. Trust me, like there were many times I had to maybe take an extended pause, but you were never like regrouping and keep going and changing and adapting with the ups and downs. And that resilience really helped me through the pandemic. It was really great. And then by extent of that, it's helped me also be able to turn around to my own kids. So when I say encouraging things to them about in terms about possibility and opportunity and living with your life ahead of you, I'm actually speaking from experience. And, so now there's credibility and you're building trust. It's like, you know what? I figured out a way to do my thing, my way. And in line with my values, and we pay the mortgage, and feel proud about what I do. And I honestly, to your point, I feel really great about. I mean, launching a podcast is a really wonderful, joyful, creative thing, and then realizing it actually touches other people is such a phenomenal gift.
Yeah, it is amazing. So, where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Years from now, okay. I sit around like I man at best for days. So, in 10 years, what I really want to have accomplished, I have a whole laundry list. You ready?
Okay, go.
I'm transitioning, working on, I think just speeding up, was, I want to have a bigger creative platform, right? So the same thing as a podcast, springboarding to more to create deeper impact and reach more people, and also produce more content. And that includes also some scripted. Within 10 years, I want to have this sort of
number one.
I don't know, like multimedia platform, multimedia entity, which is my business. But having won awards, having amazing partnerships, but also part of my big dream is actually start a family foundation.
Awesome.
That is
I love that.
Yeah, very education based, because I really do believe in access, and I know how much my education has made a difference to me. So to be able to provide opportunity through education. So I want to have accomplished all that. And by the way, this one's not up to me, but I really want to be a grandmother by then.
I know. I send pictures of other people's babies and I get immediate text back that I am insane. You are insane. I'm like, oh,
I just see it here. I say it. It's our community of women here. And anyone listening, and I'm sharing with you what I could not share. Yeah, I can't send those texts. I can get I might get blocked.
Yeah, I know. It did not bode well, trust me. I don't recommend this, ladies. If you're like me, dying to be a grandmother, don't tell them. Your kids in your early to mid 20s, they're not interested.
I have this wild dream that I want to be an EGOT, which I'm so behind. Oh. But that's Emmy, Grammy, Oscar.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. So if people want to listen to your podcast, learn more about you, learn in this next chapter, if they need to learn video skills, media skills, how can people find you?
I'm so easy to find. So everything goes through my website, abelintermedia.com, which is ABELINTERMEDIA.com. So everything's there. If you Google my name, Barbara Barna Abel, my information is all really public. When you send me an email, I will write back. If you, connect with me on LinkedIn, we will chat. I'm really happy and active on the socials. So thank you for asking. So then, shoot me a note. And then for anybody, I have a really fun ebook, 12 Tips for Success on Camera. That's a free download. That's helpful. And and my podcast is everywhere you listen to podcasts or on my website.
And it's awesome. I have been honored to be a guest twice, and I listened to it. You have great guests on there, great tips, great advice. So Barbara,
I remember from our first conversation around PR for anyone, which by the way, I just sold a book for you today.
Thank you.
But the other was because you talked so much about failing to succeed. You know, you need failure in order to succeed. So you're coming back to talk more about that.
Okay. I would love to do that. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for getting me to this point where I am. This is bringing me a lot of joy, and I owe it to you. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening, or if you're watching this episode of Living Ageless and Bold. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe. You can also head over to the website, livingagelessandbold.com, where we have information that educates, inspires, because we have exclusive opportunities for women like us over 55. And no matter what you do, keep living ageless and bold.